Breaking tonight, new audio tape surfaces of Congressman Keith Ellison talking about Israel. And it could mean trouble for the man considered the likely new head of the Democratic Party. This is getting dicier and dicier. Trace Gallagher has more on the controversy live from our LA newsroom. Trace?
Megan, when Minnesota Congressman Keith Ellison first made his bid to become the next chair of the Democratic National Committee, much was made of his past controversies, including his involvement with the Nation of Islam and his defense of Louis Farrakhan's anti-Semitic remarks. But even the Anti-Defamation League, which bills itself as a Jewish non-governmental group, defended Ellison, saying it appreciated his contrition and would not rush to judgment. But now more of Congressman Ellison's previous comments have come to light, including audio tape of a speech Ellison gave in 2010 referring to Israel. Watch.
The United States foreign policy in the Middle East is governed by what is good or bad through a country of 7 million people. A region of 350 million. All turns on a country of 7 million. Does that make sense? No. Is that logic?
No.
Right? When the Americans who trace their roots back to those 350 million get involved, everything changes. Can I say that again?
Congressman Ellison says his comments were selectively edited and taken out of context, and we should note the audio was uploaded by the Investigative Project on Terrorism, whose founder, Steve Emerson, has dealt with credibility questions in the past. Still, the ADL thinks Ellison should be disqualified, saying, quote, whether intentional or not, his words raise the specter of age-old stereotypes about Jewish control of our government, a poisonous myth that may persist in parts of the world where intolerance thrives, but has no place in open societies like the U.S. Ellison is also battling information uncovered by CNN, which found that in 1990, he wrote a column in his student newspaper at the University of Minnesota where he defended a black radical speaker who claimed that during World War II, quote, the Zionists joined with Nazis in murdering Jews so they would flee to Palestine. It was in that same student newspaper that Ellison said there should be a separate country for black Americans, preferably in the southeast United States. Incoming Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who initially backed Keith Ellison for DNC chair, says his support still stands. Megan.
Trace, thank you. Joining me now with more, Fox News contributor and townhall.com editor Katie Pavlich and DNC platform committee member Namiki Konst. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. Katie, let me start with you. This is a guy who defended Louis Farrakhan as not anti-Semitic, who called him a role model. He called Farrakhan a role model, a guy who called Judaism a gutter religion and said Hitler was a great man. And now they're thinking about making Congressman Ellison the head of the Democratic Party. Your thoughts?
Well, I just first have to say that the Democratic Party has become increasingly anti-Israel over the past couple of years. It was at the 2012 DNC convention where delegates booed putting Jerusalem back into the platform after it was initially taken out. It's Keith Ellison talks about, this comment that he's under fire for with the American interests being involved with Israel. Well, America has an interest in Israel because it's the only democracy in the Middle East where women and gays can walk around and openly be themselves. Keith Ellison is a radical. He has no business running a major party in this country. He, as we said, has defended Louis Farrakhan. When he went on a trip in 2008 to Saudi Arabia, met with the president of a bank that funds suicide bombings in Israel from the Palestinian side. He has also defended cop killer Assata Shakur, which is a whole other issue. So he's a radical who has no business in being at the head of a major party in this country.
Namiki, the ADL now has come out and said, look, we initially defended him, but we view these remarks as disturbing and disqualifying. Why are they wrong?
Well, they're wrong because, let's be clear here, there are a lot of remarks being taken out of context, being pulled from years ago in snippets, and specifically this audio is mentioned by
that was 2010.
Well, right.
The stuff about why do we dictate our Middle East policy based on the 7 million was 2010.
Edited by somebody who the Southern Poverty Law Center called an anti-Muslim extremist.
He's not denying it. He's not denying it. We heard it for ourselves.
I'm saying that but the person who edited this footage. Now, to be clear, let's be very clear here. Keith Ellison has been one of the strongest allies for Israel. And let me explain why. He has fought against Holocaust deniers in the Minnesota State Legislature. He fought for $27 billion in Israel funding. He has been a humanitarian. All you have to do is look at his record. And you just look at his allies on top of it.
We are looking
Senator
at his record.
Schumer.
And he said Louis Farrakhan is not anti-Semitic, a man who said Hitler is great and Judaism is a gutter religion.
He was never a member. Let me be very clear. He has never been a member of the Nation of Islam. I know Keith Ellison.
But he defended that guy as not anti-Semitic. How do you call Louis Farrakhan not anti-Semitic?
Louis Farrakhan organized the Million Man March.
Come on.
Well, let me. Do you remember what the Million Man March was?
Yes, that doesn't make
And as he marched, he got in his head. Jews are part of a gutter religion.
Maya Angelou was at the Million Man March. You know, so many leaders were the Million Man March. It does, because
Maya Angelou never came out and said Farrakhan was not anti-Semitic. Go ahead, Katie.
Keith Ellison never said anything anti-Semitic specifically. You name one quote
that Farrakhan wasn't anti-Semitic.
He didn't say anything anti-Semitic.
His actions of going to Saudi Arabia and meeting with radical clerics who have said anti-Semitic things about Jews and Israel. As I just mentioned, his meeting with the president of a bank that funds suicide bombings to kill Jews, meeting with radical Islamic
pulling from all these places. Ooh, but not
his record, no, Miki.
He knows a guy who knows a guy.
Hold on, let Katie finish her point.
It is his record.
Hold on, I'll go back to you, Miki.
Meeting
Katie,
with
go.
clerics that not only call for the death of Jews in Israel, but also the death and murder of American troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. So if we're going to talk about his record, we should talk about it in its entirety, and it includes his radical viewpoints on a variety of issues. You can't just cherry pick the things that you like. It's a variety of issues that he has a very bad record on.
Go ahead,
so radical is no business.
If you look at his legislative record, there's nothing that shows he is radical. Let's be clear here. The only radical that we should be talking about right now is President Trump, who has somebody who's a white supremacist advising him at the White House.
We're talking right now about Ellison.
So Ellison,
go ahead. You have the floor on Ellison.
As somebody who was on the platform committee, who helped pass the most progressive platform, the most pro-Israel platform in the history of the Democratic Party, who was there doing that? That was Representative Keith Ellison. He has the strongest record of humanitarian issues in Congress. He is somebody who wants to reform the Democratic Party, and there is not one comment that is anti-Semitic.
I gotta go, but I gotta ask you quickly, Nomiki. I gotta ask you quickly. Nomiki. 26 years ago, he offered support for a separate country for Black Americans, saying they'd have the option of choosing their own land base or to remain in the United States. Since Black people toiled most diligently in the southeastern section of the United States, that quite naturally would be the most suitable. That means Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Blacks, of course, would not be compelled to move to the black state. Peaceful whites would not be compelled to move away. Problematic?
He was 22 years old, responding to police brutality at a time when there was massive police brutality. And let's not forget, he's 53 years old. If you were to go back and look at your writing from when you were 22 years old, would you be proud of it?
He has the same attitude.
Steve Bannon.
Go for it. You won't find anything like that.
He has the same attitude today as he did back then. He just because
you don't know him, Katie. I do, and I can tell you he voted for $27 billion in Israel funding.
Right.
Steve Bannon never did that. Donald Trump sure as hell never did that.
Okay.
All right. Good to see you both.
Thanks, Mike.
Fire.
Thanks.